Good morning.
Yes.
Buenos dias.
I think it's a good morning. We had a storm. We've had so many storms lately.
Yeah.
Storm after storm after storm. They're not on top of each other. They're after each other. And
We get some really great days between them, though.
yeah, it's been good weather. But last night I got up at about 1 a.m. and the power did flicker, but it stayed on, and so we're back. But I thought it was going to blow our trees over. We have this one tree. I probably shouldn't put this in your head, but we have this one tree that's leaning towards our bedroom. And I went out there
Lovely.
before the storm yesterday and just kind of sized it up like, where are you going to fall if you were to fall? And I realized he would probably fall right past the edge of the house. Unless the wind is blowing southeast, which it was really hard last night. So anyway.
Well, Sarah's neighbor did lose a tree.
Oh, did they really?
But it's just on their land, but it was a big one.
Okay. All right. Well, glad to have all our trees, all of our children, those hurt.
We're still alive.
We're live. Okay. So we're up to John 5:25.
25.
And let's just kind of review what has been going on. So this is a Jesus story, as my kids would call it. Jesus healed, it seems like it's weeks ago now, but Jesus healed the guy by the pool. And then the guy by the pool kind of ratted him out because the Jewish leaders were looking for him. And then after that point, this debate ensued. And we've been looking at the debate for a while. So we're getting close to the end of the debate. But Jesus says some really interesting things in our section today. So why don't you read this verse?
Most assuredly I say to you, the hour is coming, and now is, when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live.
Okay, so before we go into a deep description of what this means, I want to read a couple of these verses because I want you to get the feeling, especially if you've never read this before, I'm just going to tell you this probably will confuse you. This confused me for a very long time. So let's read this next verse.
For as the Father has life in himself, so he has granted the Son to have life in himself.
Okay, and then this one.
And has given him authority to execute judgment also, because he is the Son of Man.
Now, those two verses to me make a little bit more sense just on the face of it, that the Father has life. We must be talking about eternal life because we're talking about the Father who's eternal. And the Father has granted the Son, who's Jesus, to have life in himself. So not only is the Son eternal, but he's also able to give life, which is kind of the theme, not kind of, it's the theme of the Gospel of John. And then it reminds us again, we saw this the other day, it reminds us again, the Son, who is Jesus, is going to be the one who executes judgment. And then it has this line, because he is the Son of Man. And that's interesting to me. It almost feels like he's saying, he's got the right because, he's lived as a man. Now, he'd have the right either way because he's God, but interesting that it puts it that way. Okay, let's read 28.
Do not marvel at this, for the hour is coming in which all who are in the graves will hear his voice and come forth.
Okay, so this sounds like he's repeating what he said a moment ago, right? Didn't he already say this? Let's go back to it. 25 says, most assuredly I say to you, the hour is coming and now is when the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. And then now he says in 28, do not marvel at this, for the hour is coming in which all who are in the graves will hear his voice and come forth. So for a long time I thought he's just saying the same thing. He's just kind of repeating himself, but that's a little confusing because he doesn't say it quite the same way. He says it a little different, but I just thought, well, he must be saying the same thing. But I want you to notice something here. Somebody showed this to me. I think maybe it was Bob Bryant. In 26, he says, a time is coming and now is. So what we see about 26 is this is now and in the future. So now for Jesus, not now, well, it's now for us too, but this was now based on Jesus' frame of reference, okay? So he's saying, this first thing that I'm saying, this is going to continue happening in the future, but it's also happening right at this moment. And then, notice what he says in 28. He says, a time is coming. And then he doesn't say, and now is. And that's future only. So let's take a look at what the now and in the future is, and then what the future only is. So 25, here's what I think is going on here. He's talking about how people are born again. In 25, this is the one that's now and in the future for Jesus. He says, the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, and those who hear will live. Now, is that not exactly what he's described in the verse right before it? Remember, right before it, he said, those who hear my words and believe the one who sent me, they have eternal life. They've crossed from death to life. They will not come into judgment. So here he's saying, he's basically repeating that. But what's interesting to me, and so we would just kind of assume that must be what he's talking about the whole time, but notice what he says here, and I think this is talking about Resurrection Day. I think he's jumped now from talking about the born again day, which each of you, if you've believed, you've had a born again day. But notice, I think this is Resurrection Day. 28 and 29 says, the hour is coming. He doesn't say it's here now. The hour is coming in which all who are in the graves. So now he's talking about the physical body. Okay, so he was talking about the spiritual rebirth of believers, but now in 28, 29, he's talking about those who are physically in their graves. They will hear his voice and come forth. They'll come forth out of their grave. So I think what we're seeing is sort of the dual nature of both being born again and resurrected. And in the Gospel of John, this is what Jesus is offering. He's offering eternal life, but with eternal life comes resurrection, physical resurrection from the grave. So I just think that's really, really fascinating, and it really makes a lot of sense when we look at it that way. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that it's just talking about the, we've been talking about in Free Grace Women how the one of the secrets to a Christian life is that it's a miracle of resurrection.
Yeah.
And so I think that first verse there is talking about the miracle of the resurrection that happens in our inner man, and then later there will be the resurrection of our physical bodies, which I think also between there, you know, our bodies are still dead because of sin while we're living on this earth, and they can be resurrected. You know, there can be a transformation there, but it won't be complete until the Lord returns. And
it's almost like
resurrection.
A reverse echo in a sense. It's like the resurrection power that's in us now and that we can even kind of sense in certain situations, like as we grow, that is the same power that's going to bring us back from the grave. Now, speaking of this resurrection day, Jesus goes on to say something that is even more confusing if we don't take some time to think about it. So let's read this verse.
And come forth those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of condemnation.
Okay, so this is one of the verses in the Gospel of John that if you come from a background where people teach sort of a performance-based salvation, they'll go to this verse probably. And what I mean by performance-based salvation is you get salvation by having faith, but then also behaving. That's a performance-based salvation. A lot of times they'll go to this verse, and you can see why, because he says, those who have done good, they will be resurrected to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of condemnation. Now, here's the problem with using this verse. There's a few problems with using this verse as an example of performance-based salvation. First of all, that doesn't fit with the rest of the Gospel of John. In fact, it doesn't fit with, we're in verse 29, it doesn't fit with verse 24 and 25. All they do is they hear the voice of the Son of Man. The implication is that they believe it, and they have life. And so now to say that, it's all based on behavior and performance, it doesn't make any sense in the context. The other thing is, I think we've got some pretty good explanation for what he's talking about here. And the way that I think about it, now there's different theories even among Free Grace people on what he's saying here. Like if you look in the, I don't know if we have one out here, in the Free Grace, the Grace New Testament commentary, I think maybe Bob Wilkin wrote the one on John. He gives a few different views on this verse. And I don't remember which is his favored view. But I think the simplest thing is basically this, that to do good, first you must do what Jesus said. And the first thing that he tells all people to do is what he said in 5:24, just a few verses before. He who hears my word and believes in him who sent me has everlasting life. That's all through the Gospel of John. And so Jesus makes it clear that, yes, there are things that he hopes you will obey after you believe. But until you've believed, you've got one task that you need to do, and that is believe. And so if somebody has never believed in Jesus, then whatever it is that they're doing is not is not considered good in heaven. I mean, it's not considered good before God because they have not done the first good. That's what I'm calling it, the first good. The very first thing that someone must do in order to be considered, as someone who's doing good is they must believe. Here's another one. This shows up in John 6, which we'll look at later, not today, but later on, probably in like 87 months from now, because at the speed we're going. But again, the first good, this is a situation where a group of Jews kind of surround Jesus and they say, tell us the works of God so that we can work them, so that we can please God, basically. And he says this is the work of God, singular, not plural. This is the work of God that you believe in him who he sent. So what Jesus is saying here basically is, you want to do what God says, step one, number one is believe in Jesus. And if you haven't done that, then nothing else is going to be good. Now, to me, that makes more sense of this verse. Oh, actually, let me go back. That makes more sense of this verse. Those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of condemnation. So if you've believed in Jesus, then at least that is something that you've done good. That is a good deed. If you've never believed in Jesus, it doesn't really, I guess you could say it matters in the world how you act. But nothing you do, until you believe in Jesus, nothing you do is going to make a difference on whether or not you have eternal life. Because notice that's what he's saying, is those who have done good, which we assume he's starting with belief, those who have done good to the resurrection of life. So if you want eternal life, you need to do this good thing. You need to believe in Jesus. Now, there's other good things you can do, but I don't think that's what he's talking about here. So you do good, which is obey Jesus' words in John 5:24, which is to believe in him. If you don't do that, then this second line would represent you. And those who have done evil to the resurrection of condemnation. So,
what's that verse about? There's filthy rags to him.
Isaiah, I believe.
Yeah, so they were, as people who were they were doing good works that were even things that the Bible said, following the law, but they were doing it without faith. They were doing it without having believed in Jesus. So even though God saw it and acknowledged it, it was trash to him. And but the world would look at it and they may not know the difference. I think it's just like we don't even have the capability to do good works in God's eyes until we believe in Jesus, because the Spirit is the one that produces the actual good.
Yeah. So Isaiah 64:6 is what you're talking about. All of us have become like one who is unclean, and all our righteous acts are like filthy rags. We all shrivel up like a leaf, and like the wind of sins, and the wind of sin sweep us away. Yeah, that's pretty good. Our righteous acts are filthy rags. Now, in context there, I guess they were having some moral trouble as well. But so it's really natural for people to say, well, this person's not a believer, but they're a really good person. And I understand that. I get that. But at the same time, I feel like what we're seeing Jesus saying is, no, you want to be a good person. Step one, believe in Jesus. And then he will begin to give you the power to begin to change. It's not necessarily automatic, but he'll begin to give you the power to move past that. He gives two more verses. And I think there are one more verse in this section, and I think this actually helps to kind of make sense of what we just saw. So let's look at this one, and then we'll be done. Or actually, two more, and we'll be done. I can of myself do nothing. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is righteous, because I do not seek my own will, but the will of the Father who sent me. Once again, we look at that and we say, the will of the Father who sent me. What is his will? What is his will for my life? Well, again, we have that from John 6. It's John 6:40. And this is the will of him who sent me. Same wording, by the way. So, this is a chapter later, but same wording. This is the will of him who sent me, that everyone who sees the Son and believes in him may have everlasting life, and I will raise them up at the last day. Once again, we see the same aspects. We see people being raised from the dead. We see them that they need to believe, and that if they believe, they have everlasting life. So, For those that have been inundated with this concept of performance-based salvation, I just want to encourage you, read beyond John 5:29. Read this section, read the chapter, read the entire gospel. And what you'll realize is if you see that verse in the context of everything else, then it begins to make sense. So I'm wondering if we got any questions. Questions are always welcome. Did your thing die?
I refreshed, and so it lost some of the other ones.
I've still got them here. Let's take a look. Okay, you want to scan through those quickly?
Haley sees trimming a tree in our near future.
Yes, that's probably true.
I don't think we have any questions.
Okay, questions are always welcome. So I guess you were kind of watching them as
Eric asked, "Hey, where is the ministry based, and who's speaking?" Oh, talking about us. Where is this ministry based, and who is speaking?
Who is speaking? Me.
This is Lucas.
And okay. Eric, I'm wondering if maybe you joined us for the first time. Thanks for joining us. We are in Longview, Texas. This is my wife, Krista. I'm Lucas, and I apologize for not introducing ourselves. We really ought to do that every day, probably, because we probably have new folks that come in. So, okay. Well, what do you think? Why don't we do our guided prayer time? And then we'll come back and tell you what else we've got going on this week. So why don't you tell them what the guided prayer time is? You're doing a fantastic job of explaining it.
All right. Guided prayer time is the time that allows you to pray, for us all to pray together. We take the model prayer from Matthew in the Bible, the book of Matthew, and we just have broken it into pieces, and we'll put one piece up at a time and give you time to pray for that piece.
Fantastic. You did very well.
I don't know, that wasn't very good.
No, it was okay. Well, you want to do it again?
No, it's okay. I'll try again tomorrow.
All right.
Not tomorrow.
No, not tomorrow.
Monday.
We'll be doing it Monday. All right, here we go, and we'll come back at the end. right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't we tell them what's going on? So Thursday, Friday, and Sunday get even more busy for us in the studios. So why don't you tell them a little bit about that?
Thursday, which might be my favorite day in the studio.
Your favorite, okay.
Is Free Grace Women. We're going through 6 Secrets of the Christian Life by Zane Hodges, which looks at some different tough passages in the Bible, but unlocks, I feel like, your Christian life to living a successful Christian life. So that's a lot of fun for ladies to join us at 11 a.m. tomorrow.
For ladies? Is that like a fish fillet? For ladies.
And then Friday at 11 a.m. we have Free Grace Kids. And I think we will have a new puppet friend this week. So
this is a fun one.
It's one of my favorites. And then Sunday, we're back here at 11 a.m. for church.
Yeah. Now, we don't have a time slot for this, but we are talking to a person who is going to begin a new show that we're going to call End Times Today. And he's kind of a somewhat well-known author and speaker and various things. So anyway, we're excited about that. We're still working on the details, and we don't know when it'll be, what time of week yet, but we would love your input on helping us shape what that ought to be. So if you have ideas, questions, suggestions on things that you'd like to see in a show on End Times, and this will be a show on End Times from a very Free Grace perspective, which to me is the only way to do it, because, well, obviously why. I mean, I don't need to explain why. So anyway, we're excited about that. That's coming up, so watch for that. And I think that's about it.
I'm going to see if there's any other...
Let's see if there's other comments. I see one that's... Oh, Catherine says thank you. Looks like just good conversation, good friendly conversation. You guys are so friendly. You guys are a lot of fun. Okay, if there's any comments we miss or we don't see, y'all feel free to keep talking. And by the way, for those of you that aren't from East Texas, y'all is a mix of you all, but you all sounds very strange to our ears. That's why you hear us say y'all a bunch.
I think guys also sounds a little bit
you
strange.
Guys sounds funny.
A little bit more normal, but
I think maybe we should really lean into it, and we should really wear cowboy hats, and we could have
we don't even own cowboy hats.
Oh, come on. We probably could find one. We could have our cow and our horse in the studio with us.
We don't have.
Tell them we don't have a cow.
We don't have those things.
We don't. She's right. We don't have one, but we do have squirrels. This is kind of fun. We'll end with this. Yesterday, I was sitting on the back porch and was working on something. I was writing or something. And a brown bunny came across the yard. And then I saw this villainous squirrel come down the tree, kind of pause and look at him. And then he came down the tree, and then he jumped off, and he chased that bunny out of the yard. Yeah. I'm guessing maybe they eat similar things, and he's like a competitor for their food source or something. But he chased him out of the yard.
Oh, my gosh. We have some beefy squirrels in our backyard. I mean, they look like muscular. Yeah. They're big.
Schwarzenegger squirrels. Yeah. Schwarza squirrels.
Schwarz.
It's like a 1990s action movie in our backyard every day. All right. Well, we love you guys, and we will talk to you soon. We'll see you tomorrow for Free Grace Women and the other things we do. So have a great day. Hope you have a good. I'm still talking for some reason. Why can't I just say bye?
Have a great day.
Have a great day. And let me tell you why you should have a great day. Here's 5 points.
Here's how you can have a great day.
Here's villainous squirrels. All right. Love you guys. We'll see you later. Signing off.